Hi everyone, welcome back to i-TUTOR IAS Academy, Tamil Nadu History NCERT series. So in our world history, today we are discussing chapter 24, that is the American War of Independence 1776 to 1783. Okay, so it's also known as American Revolutionary War, was the armed conflict through which 13 North American colonies successfully overthrew British rule to establish the sovereign United States of America. So that is the American War of Independence. Okay, and in April 1975 to September 3, 1783. Okay, so around 1776 to 1783 is the duration of this American War of Independence. And what's the core cause? There is discontent over British attempt to impose greater control and taxes. That is, example is Stamp Act, Tea Act, etc., without providing the colonies representation in Parliament, summarized by its slogan, "No taxation without representation." And it is sparked by the Battle of Lexington and Concord on April 19, 1775. So that is the beginning of this American War of Independence, and formally adopted by the Second Continental Congress on July 4, 1776, and the American victory at the Battle of Saratoga, okay, that's on 1777, convinced France to openly enter the war as an American ally. And the Siege of Yorktown in 1781, where British General Cornwallis surrendered to a combined Franco-American force. And the Treaty of Paris, that is on 1783, in which Great Britain formally recognized US independence. Okay, so that is the major facts of this American War of Independence. And major figures are in this war are George Washington, Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army and first US President, and Thomas Jefferson, that is principal author of the Declaration of Independence, and Benjamin Franklin, key diplomat who secured vital French support, and King George III, the British monarch during the Revolution. And initially a civil war within the British Empire, it became a global conflict as France and Spain joined against Britain to weaken their strategic rival, and the Dutch Republic also provided financial support and was eventually drawn into its own war with Britain. And so this is basic about American War of Independence. Okay, further we will discuss in this unit. So first of all, English colonies in America. And after the discovery of American continent, in geographical discoveries we already discussed, there was a continuous migration of people from Europe to the New World, and South America was colonized by Spain, and the English and French established their colonies in the North America. And by mid 18th century, the English had established their 13 colonies along the Atlantic coast, and landless peasants, people seeking religious freedom, and traders had settled there. And initially, the relationship between the colonies and British government was cordial, and although these colonies were controlled through the governors and they enjoyed political freedom, each colony had its own assembly elected by the people, and it enacted laws concerning local matters. However, the policies followed by the home government, that is Britain, had resulted in the confrontation. And this ultimately led to the American War of Independence, at the end of which the colonies became independent. And there were several causes for this war. And what are the fundamental cause of this war? The British government followed the policy of mercantilism. According to this policy, the colonies existed for the benefit of the mother country. Okay, and the colonies were expected to furnish raw materials. They had to serve as market for produced goods. Moreover, the colonies had to ship their goods only in British ship. And in this way, the colonies were expected to add more wealth to the home country, and the British government enacted law to implement this policy of mercantilism. So that is a fundamental cause, and a series of navigation acts were passed by the British Parliament to control the trade of American colonies. These acts insisted that all the goods of both exports and imports should be carried in ship owned by England. Custom collectors were appointed in the colonies to implement the Navigation Act, but the American colonies considered this act as infringement of their rights. And the Molasses Act levied heavy duties on sugar and molasses imported into American colonies. In addition to this, a series of trade acts were also passed to control the trade in the colonies. And for example, the Hat Act of 1732 prohibited the import of hats from one colony to the other. And the Iron Act 1750 stopped the large scale production of iron in the colonies, and these acts were opposed by the colonies. And due to these restrictions, bitterness developed between the home government and the American colonies. They were looking for an opportunity to free themselves from the control of Britain. And circumstances leading to the War of Independence and 7 Years' War. The end of the Seven-Year War in 1763 and the transfer of Canada from France to England removed the French fear from the mind of the Americans. And there was no need to depend on their mother country against any possible attack by French. Therefore, the American colonies decided to face the colonial attitude of the British. And Granville measures. What is Granville measures? When Granville was the Prime Minister of England, a series of acts were passed affecting the interests of American colonies. The Proclamation of 1763 prohibited the colonists from purchasing land beyond Appalachian Mountain, and the Sugar Act of 1763 increased the duties on sugar, which affected the interest of the colonies. The Stamp Act of 1765 insisted on the use of British stamp in commercial and legal document of the colonies, and the Quartering Act made it compulsory that colonists should provide food and shelter to English troops. These measures were severely opposed by the colonists. They raised the slogan, "No taxation without representation," thus insisting American representation in the English Parliament as violence broke out in the street. The Stamp Act was repealed. And Townshend's law. What is Townshend law? Charles Townshend, the finance minister of England, imposed fresh taxes on glass, paper, tea, paint, etc. in 1767. It was known as Townshend laws. The Americans protested it and boycotted the British goods. On 5th of March 1770, 5 Americans were killed by the British soldiers at Boston during the protest. It was known as the Boston Massacre. After this event, the Townshend law were repealed. And Boston Tea Party. So, Boston Tea Party, you will get the figure from Google. In 1773, a new Tea Act was passed imposing a tax on import of tea. It was a symbol to show that the British Parliament had the right to tax the colonies, but Americans showed their protest. A group of Americans dressed as Red Indians climbed on the ship and threw away the tea bundles into the sea at the Boston harbor. This event took place on 16 December 1773 and it was known as the Boston Tea Party. The offenders were punished. In 1774, the British Parliament passed the Intolerable Act against the Americans in order to prevent such protest. And Philadelphia Congress. So, this is the picture of Jefferson. So, American colonists decided to unite in their fight against British. In September 1774, the first Continental Congress was held at Philadelphia. It was attended by the representatives of the 12 colonies except Georgia. This Congress appealed to British King to remove restrictions on industries and trade and not to impose any taxes without their consent. And the Second Continental Congress met in May 1775 at Philadelphia. And delegates from all the 13 colonies attended this Congress, and prominent leaders like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin participated in it. And George Washington was made the commander-in-chief of the American army. As a last attempt, as olive branch petition was sent to the British King George III, who rejected it, and the king proclaimed that the American colonies were in the state of rebellion. Okay, so that is Philadelphia Congress. Next is Declaration of Independence. This is Thomas Paine. In January 1776, Thomas Paine came to America from England and issued a pamphlet, Common Sense, and it attacked the idea of hereditary monarchy and advocated democratic government. More than 1 lakh copies of this 50-page booklet were distributed throughout the 13 colonies. It included the fighting spirit among the Americans. On 4th July 1776, the American Declaration of Independence was adopted by the Continental Congress, and it was prepared by the Committee of Five led by Thomas Jefferson, who included the ideal of human freedom in it. And the Declaration of Independence laid emphasis on the unalienable right of men, namely life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. What are the important battles? The war started in 1775 when the first battle was fought between the British soldiers and the colonial militia at Lexington in Massachusetts. Soon, the George Washington assumed the command of the army of the American colonies. The British general A. Gage won a victory at Bunker Hill, and in 1776, the British force led by Sir William Howe defeated Washington in the Battle of Long Island. However, the Army of American Colonies, commanded by General Gates, defeated British troops at Saratoga in October 1777. The victory at Saratoga marked a turning point in the war. So, this is a picture of George Washington here. And the French troop under Lafayette came to the help of American colonies. Finally, the British troop under the command of General Cornwallis surrendered to Washington at Yorktown in 1781, and the war came to an end by the Treaty of Paris in 1783. And what are the importance of American War of Independence? The American colonies became free and Republic of the United States of America was established. The first democratic government with a written constitution in the world became a reality. The Bill of Rights ensured fundamental rights to the citizen of USA, and the American War of Independence was also called the American Revolution because it inspired the French Revolution. It was not only a war against England but against aristocracy and reactionary element. It was also a fight against colonial domination. Okay, so it's like our independence, Indian independence. Okay, and it introduced new political, social, and economic setup in the United States of America, and democracy with the separation of power on the model suggested by French thinker Montesquieu was founded. Capitalism also took strong root, and however, the rights of the sons of the soil, the Red Indians, and the Negroes were not considered at that time. Okay, so this is importance of the American War of Independence. So this is 13 American colonies. Okay, so independence, after independence, the 13 American colonies. You can Google it also. You will get clear figure. Georgia is there, Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So you can pinpoint in your uh, world map study. Okay, New Hampshire is here, so like that. So 13 American colonies is here in this picture. Okay, so this is all about this unit. So here we discuss American War of Independence totally. What are the fundamental causes we discussed, and circumstances leading to the War of Independence we discussed, and also the importance of American War of Independence we discussed in this unit. In between any doubts, you can contact us anytime. For more NCRT series, you just do like, share, and subscribe our channel. Thank you so much.